Welcome back into the Pig Trail Show. Another Sunday means another Hog Hoops report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Jacob Morris. And Kevin, we've got a little bit of a lull. The team on break right now, but John Calipari doesn't stop recruiting. Another five-star that Arkansas is in contention for. Visit list coming out for Koa Pete, a power forward. Get out of Arizona. Seems like he's got an offer from everybody across the entire country. Arkansas scores a visit.
Koa Pete, 6'8", you mentioned power forward. Some qualities that remind me, let's go old school, Corliss Williamson.
Wow.
The Arkansas's lone national championship in basketball, Corliss Williamson was the man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two-time SEC Player of the Year, two-time All-American. But look, I think Koa Pete has some similar qualities. I've seen this young man compete since the spring after his 8th grade year. So going into as a high school freshman, when he came to Little Rock a few years ago, and I've seen him on the Adidas 3SSB circuit. He's very impressive how he uses his strong physique around the basket, a la Corliss Williamson. He can stretch the floor a little bit with some face-up stuff, knocking down some shots. He'll step out and hit a three here and there. Really good in transition. Really high floor IQ. Another thing that reminds me of Corliss. But look, he's got 5 visits scheduled. He had Arkansas in his final 9 or top 9 schools. I've been reporting for a while. I've had a couple of sources close to him giving me information, and both of them have came to the conclusion he would take a visit to Arkansas. I interviewed him back in May in Texas during an Adidas 3SSB event, and he told me the relationship with Cal was strong. Now that he's at Arkansas, he'd really like to take a visit. Well, that's going to happen. I mentioned Arkansas in his top 9 schools. He's got a list of 5 visits out of Arkansas the weekend of September 14th, which is a football home game Saturday for the Razorbacks hosting Alabama Birmingham. It's the only football game in September at home in Fayetteville for that month. And so you understand why he's picked that date. Around that, he's also going to take visits to 2 of the in-state home schools, Arizona State and Arizona, home state schools there. Also plans to visit Duke. And he's got Baylor on his list of places to stop and visit as well. So it's a pretty good mix of some really strong basketball programs. Specifically, in my opinion, when you look at the home state schools, I've been told it's going to be hard to maybe beat Arizona. But anytime Calipari reaches in and makes an offer to a 5-star and then gets them on campus, look out, because this guy has a high success rate in reeling them in. We know Arkansas is the first off the board with a top 10 rated 5-star to actually commit, and Darius Acuff Jr. That went down a few weeks ago. The 6'3" guard out of Detroit plays at IMG Academy. But I don't think John Calipari's done. It's a deep 2025 class. I talk about it a lot, Jacob, just how really good it is, especially in those top 10 to 15 players. Koa Pete's ranked 5th if you look at some of the national rankings, 5th in that class. Again, a 5-star. Love his game. Over 23 points, nearly 7.5 rebounds on that Adidas 3SSB circuit, playing with 17 U Compton Magic. So let's keep an eye on that. It's not the only news coming out of that class of 2025 this week related to Arkansas, but it's a big piece of news nonetheless. And by the way, when Pete's here, I'm told he'll obviously attend that football game that I mentioned, but we'll also be taking in Razorback men's basketball practice. It's that time of year where the students are back. You get to see the fan atmosphere at a Razorback game, albeit football, not basketball, but that's okay. But he's also going to get to attend practice because Arkansas will have returned the men's team to the court, by that time.
Yeah, it should be interesting to watch there. And it's like you said, I think we kind of sound like a broken record with this as well. When you list off these kids that Cal's going after, you say, man, it's a tough school to beat out. It's going to be tough to beat out Arizona at home. And I remember we said the same thing about Acuff when he was kind of narrowing down his list, right? First it was UConn. Oh, man, it's hard to beat the Huskies, back-to-back national championships. But as we say time and time again, when you're going after kids of this caliber, those are the schools you're going to have to beat out. And I think it's a perspective thing, right, Kevin? Because sometimes it can be daunting. Oh, Arkansas is going up against blank school, blank blue blood. But when you have John Calipari, all of a sudden it's schools look at Arkansas and say, we got to beat Arkansas for a kid. So it's a perspective shift as well. You're in with all the big fishes, and Arkansas is doing well so far.
Well, Cal's a blue blood among coaches. I think he's the greatest recruiter of all time in the college game. I say it seems like every time we're on, but we're going to be talking about recruiting because he wins plenty of those. He finishes first in a lot of those races to get a player. And, I look at it another way. Arkansas is no slouch
Yeah.
historically as a program. So you've got, and he even said it in his introductory press conference way back in April. He looks at Arkansas as a blue blood
Mm-hmm.
basketball. So you've got a great 1-2 combo there, school coach. Again, a Koa Pete. I mean, the people that are involved with him that are talking to me are saying, man, he really likes Calipari. He really likes Arkansas. His sister played down at Arkansas Pine Bluff. When I covered him as between 8th and ninth grade year coming into Little Rock, he told me when I interviewed him then that Arkansas was not new to him as far as a state and family and different things. And so the sisters won. But I mean, there are some ties here. We'll see how it plays out. Anytime Calipari's involved, again, circling back to the point we're making here, it may not be a foregone conclusion that he's going to stick close to home, and maybe it's one of those Arizona schools with a Wildcat. Some people think is the front runner. I don't know that you can ever rule Calipari out on a player, especially when you're waiting on him to come to campus, which has been set up and planned now.
Yeah, well, from one 5-star player to another. Let's just keep talking recruiting, shall we? Chris Sinak, another 5-star kid, and he releases his top 12, and sure enough, there's Coach Cal and the Hogs once again making an appearance for a 5-star guy.
5-star guy. Look, this guy was around the top 50 coming into the spring, and he just kept inching his way up the ladder by just performing, going up against some of the top players in the country. Then you got to that June period where you're kind of out of the shoe circuit for the month, and you're really focused on some of these all-star camps. He went to that prestigious MBPA Top 100 camp in Orlando, Florida, and got the MVP out there. And there was a lot of really good players out there, a lot other 5-stars, but a 6'10" forward center. I think when I look at Arkansas, I think he'd play probably the 5, but potentially could slide over. But Arkansas's coaching staff was at that MBPA Top 100 camp, including John Calipari. And so even though he'd become a stock riser by then and a chart climber in the recruiting rankings, Arkansas wasn't necessarily the first in a group of high majors to offer. But Arkansas did eventually offer him. And so that puts you more on the radar when Calipari calls you and extends that scholarship offer. Now it's starting to get serious. Top 12, okay, you'll take that. There's a host of other SEC schools. About half of that group, I think, is SEC. I think it's LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, and maybe is it Kentucky that's in there, and then Arkansas. And so it is a host of SEC schools that make up about half of it. And we'll see if it materializes into a visit. But again, you made the list, and we'll see where that goes. There's other 5-star guys. Caleb Wilson, I've talked about a lot, class of 2025, 6'9" combo forward out of the Atlanta area. And he's told me that he'll not only has he been talking with Acuff about playing together in college, but he loves Calipari. Visited Kentucky when Cal was there. He told me he's going to visit sometime in the fall, likely a football weekend. Makes sense again. Reasons understandable. You get to see the fan atmosphere, see what it's like with school back, and then you get to attend a basketball practice, at least one, maybe more. But he's a guy that I'm told, I've had multiple folks close to it telling me Arkansas, if it had decision had to be made today, Arkansas would be in first place. That'd be the choice. Now he's going to take visits. It's going to, and he's got a top 12 list that Arkansas was on. Also, visits maybe coming up with Alabama and Kentucky. But he told me Arkansas is definitely getting a visit. So let's keep an eye on some of these top 5 rated 5-stars. All of them are in somebody's top 5. Every name we've mentioned today. And then there's Malik Thomas, the guard out of Pittsburgh, who's going to be an overtime elite. Took that UConn visit in June, had a visit set for Arkansas a few days later, postponed it. Then the thought was everybody was rushing to judgment. This guy's going to commit soon to UConn. July was a dead period, live eval on the circuit, but dead for visits. But he's emerging out of July, talking about taking a visit to Arkansas and other places as well. So it wasn't a cancellation. It was what he told me it was at the time, a postponement, if in fact he goes ahead and delivers on that visit. Now I'm told he's eyeballing dates in September and October. There's 2 home football games in October. Only that Alabama Birmingham in September. And so here's another thing. Arkansas may have more than Koa Pete on campus for a visit on that weekend of September 14th. Could it be a Malik Thomas? Could it be one of the other names I mentioned or somebody else? Remember, there's in-state class of 2025 Isaiah Seeley, who's also looking at visit dates, 6'7" guard out of Springdale. several high major offers. Recently visited Ole Miss in the early part of August. Now we're in a dead period again until the 21st of this month through the 31st. I think most of the visits, though, are going to settle around September and October coming up, where they can, again, be on campus. When school's back in, you get the fan atmosphere for football games. You get to attend basketball practice. But, Jacob, just kind of putting all of this together, if you go back to Darius Acuff Jr.'s visit back in May, early May, then he committed just recently. He wasn't the only player on campus for a visit. That was the weekend that DJ Wagner was on campus, and he ends up committing a couple of weeks later. So it's not unprecedented for John Calipari to host multiple big impact, big high level guys on the same weekends. We've seen that before in Arkansas before this coaching change, and we've seen it for Calipari in the past. But I can't firm up yet who else might be coming. I've got a few names. And we'll see if that plays out that way or if they now shift other guys to other parts of the fall for visits after Coapete.
Should be interesting to look at where all the guys come in. But regardless, positives all around in terms of potential visits with a whole host of five-star guys. Hey, let's go from potential future Hogs to former Hogs. I know you spent some time with Isaiah Joe at his camp recently. An Arkansas flavor to it all. What was that like? What was it like talking to him?
Well, it was great. It was his second annual. Now you can call it annual. It was the second one. I did Joe Shooter Shoot Camp, and he got into town Friday. It was here in the 501 in Little Rock. This is like a second home to him. He always tells me that when I interview him. But he got in Friday, got some interview content out, and then camp was spread over 2 days, 2 sessions on Saturday, an elite camp that happened today. But you had a lot going on. Isaiah Joe, this was an outstanding camp. The inaugural one this time last year got a lot of rave reviews, not only from the campers, the participants, their parents, but some of the organizers and coaches they brought in to help. But you had the Oklahoma City Thunder organization represented here with multiple people in, including the head coach, Mark Dagnall, who was the NBA's coach of the year this past season. Everybody knows Oklahoma City, since Isaiah Joe has been there, has really come out of the cellar in the NBA and rose up to the best record in the Western Conference this year, the number 1 seed in the NBA playoffs out of the Western Conference. They got as far as the conference semifinals, lost to Dallas in 6 games, but Joe started the last 2 games there. One of the best players and reserves in the NBA, a really good player. Mark Dagnall talked about that. He talked about the chemistry with Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams, 2 guys that played together a lot coming up through Fort Smith High School ranks. They were both Razorbacks, but not exactly at the same time. Now playing, again, the last 2 seasons with the Oklahoma City Thunder and all the success they brought as key pieces to that rotation, again, for a team that's one of the best in the NBA now, looks to take another step forward next year. But Dagnall had nothing but praise for Isaiah Joe, his family, the community. And you mentioned Pro Hogs. I mean, you had Daryl Macon, Jalen Barford, and then Trey Thompson, who his time at Arkansas just a few years ago, he was part of 3 NCAA tournament teams under Mike Anderson. That's the coach he played for. So you had a lot of Daryl Macon and Jalen Barford, both first-team All-SEC guys. Macon's had, won a couple of 2-way contracts in the NBA a few years ago. He's been playing overseas. Barford played in the NBA G League and has had other professional opportunities. So this is what happens when you have that Razorback impact with also the in-state guys coming together in August. We're talking basketball. It's relevant. They understand that it's relevant because a lot of folks converged on the 501, including, again, the NBA Coach of the Year. And then we had the Olympics wrap up today. Real quick, Jacob, because I asked Isaiah Joe about this. Joel Embiid, he played with in Philadelphia. He won gold with Team USA yesterday, the men, but he also had teammates that were part of Team Canada that's only going to get better and better because that's a young team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort amongst those. Josh Giddey, who he played with last year with Australia. Misic, who played with Serbia. They won a bronze medal, was on split time with OKC last year in Charlotte when he was traded. So Isaiah Joe was talking about hopefully someday in some way he gets to wear that USA on his jersey, but he's fully supporting his guys, especially Team USA. Again, men and women, gold medals over the last 48 hours, allowing the United States to pull, even with China in the gold medal count as the games concluded today, just earlier today, 40 apiece, but USA plus 35 in the overall medal. 126-91 over China. China was second place there. You bring it back home for the Los Angeles Olympics. Now, Jacob, you weren't around,
Nope.
but I went nuts. I was like 15 years old when LA hosted
Yeah.
in '84 and racked up a bunch of gold, and that was the last team of amateurs from the United
Hmm.
States to win a gold medal. That was Michael Jordan and a couple of Razorbacks, Alvin Robertson and Joe Klein.
Yeah, yeah. The women's game was interesting. That one was a lot closer than anybody expected after all
Yeah.
that. They were going for whatever 50 some wins in a row. And, I look up, I pulled my phone out this morning and looked at halftime. I was like, they're down. I was like, got a
Yeah.
little bit hairy there, but they pulled it out as well. But it's great to hear about Isaiah Joe and just the amount of Thunder contingent there as well, just within the organization to go there
Yeah.
and support him. I mean, that's pretty special when you talk about obviously a guy that played a big time role, but there are some organizations, right, that maybe they do that for their top line guy, right? But to roll that out for Joe is pretty special. It was cool to have all those guys around, I'm sure.
Yeah, Jalen Williams,
Yeah.
you guys covered his camps, and the Thunder had a major presence in these guys' camps. And Dagnall talked about it. Look, we support our players
Yeah.
in their communities, and they have a different. It's a small market,
Hmm.
and so look how they've built that team through the draft and accumulating draft picks. There's not a lot of trades. Now they did get some stuff done in this offseason. They really haven't done that in a while. It's just been homegrown talent through the draft. And so Isaiah Joe was a special situation coming over from Philadelphia because he was waived at the end of preseason 2 years ago, and Oklahoma City took a chance, and it has paid off. There are people in that community and around that organization that talk about him so far as the greatest free agent pickup they've had, and so he was an unknown
Hmm.
in terms of a guy that had really established himself in the league just yet. We know about him, and I knew this was in the works for him. I knew as long as he got an opportunity, he was going to make the best of it. He's done that. He's a guy that I think if they tweak his role just a little bit, increase his minutes just a little bit,
Yeah.
whether it starts or not, has a chance with how good he is shooting from three and the volume that he puts up per minutes. He's a guy that can put his name in there. He was about a third of the season last year. They were talking about him for sixth man of the year, and then his minutes went down just a little bit, not for anything he did, just some tweaks they made. But he's a guy that I think we could see in a three-point shooting
Yeah.
contest or an all-star weekend in the future, and potentially back in that sixth man of the year conversation. But again, I think his minutes, not necessarily the role, but maybe the minutes increase by 6 or 7 per game. Doesn't sound like a lot, but at that level, that can be a big difference in his value and his perception.
Yeah, he's a great guy or a great example of. We talk about this with Gafford as well. Just if you can hone down and build a couple core skills, right? Where it's like with Isaiah Joe, he is such an elite shooter. He can handle himself on the defensive side of the ball. With Gafford, he's such a good rebounder. He's such a good inside presence, right? You're not going to make all-star teams, but that's how you stay in the NBA for 10, 15 years. It's been great to see Joe get established like that.
Yeah, you've nailed it. And guys like Jalen Williams are
Yeah.
figuring that out. He's both of them are so their basketball IQs are really high, and their court awareness, all that kind of goes together. Feel, and so you don't have to be a superstar to make an impact. In fact, there are very few superstars outside of that. When you look at 450 players in the NBA, there's only a few more all stars, and then you're figuring out who you are and what your role can be. Sometimes less is more. But again, Isaiah Joe, one of the best gravity players in the NBA. When you talk about what he does to defenses that have to account for him and how it helps others, he plays decoy a lot. It's exactly on a team with that much talent, it makes things easier for other guys. And then if you try to help, he's going to make you pay. He is an elite 3-point shooter. Again, we talk about that. Does everything. Jalen Williams, to me, he really this year when it got into the playoffs. There were times he really helped Oklahoma City in some big moments in the playoffs. Both of those guys, and you said it, you look around the league, I think Moses Moody going into year 4, here's a guy that's playing behind a ton of Hall of Famers in the backcourt. It's been Klay Thompson, it's been Steph Curry. He's not a point guard, but when you've got Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, who had an all-star run, who was a top pick a few years ago, even Andre Iguodala, even though he was retired this year, the first 2 years, he was in that group. They went out and got Chris Paul, another Hall of Famer. It's just hard to, it's hard to judge a former Hog, a pro Hog right now, based on what's been ahead of him. I think the sky's the limit for him. Bobby Portis is still doing his thing. I think he's been consistently the best sixth man in the NBA spanning the past 4 seasons. Probably should have picked up some NBA Six Man of the Year hardware. He's been a finalist a couple of times. I think he's been. I think they've overlooked him, and it's pretty glaring how much better he's been. Not only in that span of 4 years, but you could pick out a couple of seasons where he probably should have gotten that award. I thought he should have. Maybe I'm a homer.
Well, maybe he'll pick one up this year. Regardless, great to see the Bro Hogs, Isaiah Joe, and everybody else continuing to build their brand. But that's going to do it for this week's Hog Hoops Report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Jacob Morris. More Pig Trail Show coming up next.